Okay, everybody, just about ready to start. I see there's a few people on already. But another minute. Okay.
It's 6 o'clock.
Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to continue on with our series on the paramis today. We're up to number 6, which is Sacca, truth. And this is something that even outside the context of the paramis that the Buddha emphasized quite a bit, truthfulness, honesty. Of course, it's one of the precepts, musawada weramani, which means refraining from false speech. And if you think about it, telling a lie, a deliberate lie, is really harmful to the other person on a deep level because you're implanting confusion into their mind. You're creating a delusion. You're bringing them further away from wisdom and from reality. It's been said, and I haven't verified this checking it myself, but I think it is true, but I've heard it said several times that in the Jataka stories, you can find examples of the Bodhisattva breaking every other precept, but never telling a deliberate lie. Speaking truthfully is something that requires not only integrity, but also courage. Sometimes it's tempting to smooth the situation over with a convenient lie or bending the truth. And this is still considered a false speech. We can't make exceptions for something like what's called colloquially a white lie. Well, it's still a lie. It's still expressing something that is not true. So the question does come up, what is actually meant by truth? And in terms of ethics, of morality, it means that you are stating things as you actually understand them or believe them to be true or to be real. So it's not a lie if you're mistaken, if you say something that's wrong, but you mistakenly took that made that statement thinking it was true. That's not a breach of the precept. It's also always an option to remain silent. If speaking the truth sounds like it feels like it's going to be too difficult or perhaps even hurtful, you do have the option of saying nothing, of maintaining silence. There's a teaching about speech that I think is a very critical one. The Buddha gives, in one sutta, he gives an analysis of the speech that a Tathagata would utter, and what a Tathagata would not utter. And it's divided into four. The very first one is the Tathagata always utters the truth. So in terms of any ethical teachings around speech, the first and most important factor is always truth. The second quality is that the speech uttered by the Tathagata is always associated with meaning and not otherwise. And here the word meaning is atta in Pali, which is equivalent of Sanskrit artha, and it's a multivalent word. It's not easily to translate exactly, but it means something like importance, significance, gravity. It has some significance. You're not. So this is the opposite of foolish babbling. The speech is meaningful. So the Tathagata speech is always true and meaningful. And the third factor is it's always beneficial, meaning that it's for the good of the listener. It helps him in some way. And the fourth factor is interesting because it's divided into two conditionals. The speech uttered by a Tathagata, given that it's true, meaningful, and beneficial, is either pleasant to hear or spoken at the right time. So there can be, you can think of examples where you have to give somebody a hard truth. Right? So it's true and it's meaningful, it's beneficial, but it's not so pleasant to hear. So in that case, you have to use discretion and withhold your statement if it's the wrong time. And it can be difficult to judge what is the right time to make the statement. Another teaching that actually comes from the Vinaya can be helpful in this situation. It's the advice on when one monk can admonish another, meaning criticize his behavior. And before admonishing someone, the monk is advised to examine his own mind and first of all, make sure he's free of the fault that he wants to admonish the other on. If he's not, if he's guilty, even in a lesser degree of the same fault, then first he should utterly purify himself of that failing before he criticizes another. He's got no business speaking otherwise. The second factor is that he should examine his own mind and be sure he's free of anger. If he's angry, irritated, then he should wait until he's calmed down and is able to speak with equanimity. And the third factor is the tricky bit, that the monk who wants to do the admonishment
should make the best judgment that he can of the other person's frame of mind and make a judgment call as to whether he's going to be able to hear it without becoming hostile. And if not, then he should withhold the admonishment and wait for a more suitable time. So it's one of the trickiest things to do is to criticize another skillfully. If it just raises hostility in the other person, then the admonishment does no good because the person becomes defensive and entrenched in their ways and justifies their behavior. So we have to be very careful with that. So here again, we see that the default option is always saying nothing, maintaining the holy silence. But when speech is uttered, it should be true and meaningful and beneficial. There's also, moving aside from the ethical consideration into a more kind of theoretical position on the nature of truth, there is in the Buddhist teaching the idea of the two truths, the ultimate truth and conventional truth. Conventional truth is seeing things, speaking about things in terms of beings and me and mine and you and yours, and conventionally using conventional speech without it assigning necessarily an ontological status to anything. Whereas ultimate truth, or paramatta dhamma, is really seeing things in terms of the ultimate qualities that are such things as the ultimate dhammas and abhidhamma, the chitta, the chittasakas, rupa, and nibbana. Those are the four ultimate categories. That is the conscious mind, mental processing, the body, and the unconditioned. The Buddha said to use conventional speech, but do not be fooled thereby. Like you wouldn't say, you wouldn't refer to yourself or another person as this particular associated conglomeration of rupa kalapas and chittasakas. That it'll be very awkward and difficult and actually confusing to people. So you say this man, this woman, me, you, without assigning an ontological or metaphysical reality to a self. But these are conventional terms that are used in the world. So conventional truth is not false. It's not a lie, to speak in conventional truth, but it's a lower level of approximation. If you're familiar with mathematical or engineering concept of approximations, you can see that it's not false. Like if you, for example, if you were laying out a garden and you wanted to make a circle of stones, and you had to calculate the how many stones you needed, and you measure the length and the diameter, and you could just multiply that by 3, and you'd be close enough. That's a good enough approximation. But you could say it's false to say that pi equals 3, but it's conventionally true in that circumstance, because you're not looking for an exact fraction of an inch accuracy. You just want a rough idea. You know? Another example of two levels of truth would be if someone says the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Well, from a higher level of truth, you could say, no, that's not true. The sun's not moving relative to the earth. The earth is rotating, and different surface points on the earth are changing in relation to the sun because of their own movement, not the sun. But although that's a higher level of truth than saying that the sun travels across the sky from east to west, if you were trying to use the sun to navigate, if you were in a boat out of sight of land, or if you were, say, lost in the woods or mountains and you're trying to find your direction and you're using the sun to navigate, it's far easier and more straightforward to think of it as moving across the sky from east to west than to try and always do a second level of calculation thinking of the movement of the earth. So we accept that in our daily life, that there are different levels of truth. And in the Buddhist discourses, we have that all the time, the levels of truth. Conventional truth in the Buddhist sense is based on sanya, or perception. It's how we perceive the world. Whereas ultimate truths are based on wisdom, or direct knowing at a deep level. When we perceive the world, we don't perceive it in terms of momentary dhammas and shifting khandas and kalapas. What we perceive are defined objects that we recognize and name: a man, a woman, a dog, a chair, a tree. You know? And those are conventional or panyati, or constructed items. They're not ultimately real in the sense of, an ontological status. So developing the parami of truthfulness requires one to always make an effort to be truthful. And that begins with being truthful to yourself. We have a tendency to try and make ourselves comfortable with avoiding hard truths, hard realities, and smoothing things over, and not really facing up to ultimately not facing up to dukkha, to birth, old age, sickness, and death. We want to fool ourselves. So first of all, you have to be honest with yourself and face the reality of every situation with courage and mindfulness, and with open eyes. And then when you express in speech or writing, when you express anything to other people, to make sure that you're fully honest, fully truthful at all times. People who are chronic liars, who are always bending or falsifying reality for gain or for improve their social position, they often lose their grip on reality. and it's common for them to go mad, especially later in life. They lose their grip on reality because they've always not put a high value on it. It's also very, if you get caught in lies, there's an old saying, oh, what a tangle web we weave when first we practice to deceive. And that's quite true. If you start telling lies, then you end up getting really twisted in knots trying to cover and keep track even of what story you've put out. So the best policy from every point of view is to be truthful, to express the reality as you understand it to the best of your ability. Because I think this is especially important these days, is truth seems to be a very rare commodity in the world right now. It's very hard to find truthful speech. And it seems to be more and more accepted that truth can be bent for other purposes. So we should try and set an example of having that integrity and courage, and that inner and outer honesty that is truthfulness. And like all the paramis, you build them up. It's like a treasure that you're accumulating, and it carries on into future lifetimes. So you strengthen any parami by practicing it. So the more you are truthful in your expression, this strengthens the parami and makes it easier to be truthful in the future. And it also helps to unfold wisdom, to see reality as it actually is. And we talked about this in the talk on the wisdom parami, panya, that the definition of wisdom in Buddhism is seeing things according to reality as they actually are, not otherwise. And developing the Sacca parami is a great aid in developing the wisdom parami. If you make it a value, an inner value, to respect and honor truthfulness, and this includes statements about the past, present, and the future. In terms of the future, this means making a promise. If you make a promise and then break it, it's the same as telling a lie. It's the same offense, the same quality of a negative quality of weakening the parami and undermining your moral character. So again, there's the option of silence. So be very careful about making promises. Make sure if you make a promise that you're able to keep it. So I think I've said just about everything I think I need to say in these remarks, and we'll go on to answering questions at this time. Okay, got the first question. Mahayana, Vajrayana give great value to examination and notions of relative and ultimate truth. Any brief thoughts on this, Ajahn? Yes, I mean, that's not just Mahayana's. Theravada also has, and I spoke about that somewhat, the distinction between conventional truth and ultimate truth, Pariyata Dhamma and Paramata Dhamma. So one speaks in terms of categories that are common to the world and that operate through our perception, and the other one speaks in ultimate realities that can't be directly perceived but are known by wisdom. Okay, next question. Does this mean it is always an okay alternative in regards to good sila and wisdom to just ignore another person's conventional speech or question, no matter how rude it may seem for that person or society? Well, I wouldn't recommend being rude, but if you find that another person's is asking some kind of confrontational question or something that if you answer truthfully it'll cause trouble, then your only other option is to be silent. It's definitely not good to say something false to smooth over a situation. How to practice honesty with discretion, as sometimes being honest it can fire back. Oh yeah, certainly. That's that fourth quality of a Buddhist speech. Spoken, if it's unpleasant to hear, it's only spoken at the right time. And it takes some skill, some dexterity of being able to state something truthful that's not pleasant to hear. And if it must be spoken, then to speak it at the right time. It's not easy. I mean, this is what I'm saying, that to be honest, to be truthful, requires both integrity and courage. It's not something that that's really soft and easy to do. It's challenging many times. Off topic, pseudo reference for the Night of the Knives, when everyone was killing each other. A few ran off and decided to live harmoniously. Okay, what you're referring to is the Aganya Sutta, which is in the Digha Nikaya. I think it's 27. I'm not really good at remembering the numbers of them, but it's in the Digha Nikaya, and this is referring to an episode that's predicted to happen in the future when humans degenerate to a level of animals and they start killing each other with swords. If we are asked to expose someone's wrongdoings at workplace, how to do that? Well, then, yeah, you have to make a moral decision at that point of what's the right thing to do. Definitely don't lie about it, but if you feel you don't want, you don't feel it's right to snitch on the person, then you have to just say that, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable speaking about that. I don't want to go into that, and that may have a backfire on you. In some cases, it may be the right thing to do is to speak up if the person is doing harm to others and causing difficulty. It can be the right thing to do. But always remember that rule is either speak the truth or be silent, say nothing. Is Samudaya Satta and Arya Satta same as conventional and ultimate truth? I think you mean Sacca rather than Satta. I'm not sure samudaya, what's that referring to? Arya Sat is noble truth. I would think it probably is the same. I'm not sure. I think you might have got the Pali a little mixed up. Does one have a moral responsibility to participate in speech? Or has one always the option to hear sound just as sound and see this as the only truth for the present? Yeah, we keep going back to that point. You always have the option to remain silent. And that's the one thing you should not do, is speak a falsehood. And we're not obligated to engage in speech all the time. Sometimes just being silent is more pleasant for everybody. There tends to be an impulse in human beings when they get together to have to kind of babble. And this is the Tirachanakata, the horizontal going speech. This is speech that's disconnected from atta, from meaning, which is also something to avoid. Okay. One wonders how we ended up in this post-truth age. It appears that honesty was more often encouraged a few decades ago. Our PM was described as having merely a nodding acquaintance with the truth. I don't know what country you're in. They say RPM, but I think that applies to my PM too. I think it's pretty common. I don't know if I'm not sure, like, whether one way or the other, whether like political people in the past were more truthful. I tend to think the media has gotten a lot less truthful in my lifetime. But yeah, our society, I think it's one of the degeneracies of our current age, is that the low value on actually speaking the truth, and the amount of outright lies and misdirections. And now we have technology that you can manipulate images and videos. There's been numerous instances of that being done. That's another form of lying, a high-tech lying that wasn't even possible before. Lying has become so normal in modern society, it's impossible to know the truth about COVID-19 and the vaccine. Yes, that is a very good example. It's to find the truth about issues like that is so difficult. One has to really make their own investigations and try and figure things out from the at a more fundamental level. It's very naive to believe anybody as an authority or an expert and just surrender to their judgment without trying to look at the underlying facts and the data. In reference to workplace, sometimes exposing other person bullying us can fire back, especially if that person is a higher position or liked by the people. It causes stress and fear in such situation. Yeah, of course. It's difficult if you're in one of those situations. I don't know. I don't think there's a magic solution to that. Something said in error isn't a lie if it's said with genuine belief, as it lacks deceptive intention. Yet there must be some spot of adverse vipaka to untruth. Can you please elaborate on this case? Yeah, well, I would say, yeah, there really isn't. If you really very sincerely believe something and you state it, but it's actually factually wrong, I don't think there's any negative karma made with that situation. But on the other hand, I think it's also highly honest to say, if you're making a factual statement that you believe, but it's not absolutely proven, to make that clear. Say, well, this is what I think it is. This is how I understand it. To try and then you're being absolutely honest. You say, I believe X is Y. If you just say X is Y and leave it as a fact, then that's not really being fully honest, because it's based on your thinking or your opinion, and you're not making that clear. What about truthfulness coupled with ill will? Bully will often find their ammo with truth. Yeah, that's in that teaching, again, going back to the teaching about what a Tathagata would utter. If it's spoken with anger, then it's not skillful speech, even if it's true. It's not easy, but it is possible to deal with difficult situations with a mind of equanimity. How do we understand Buddha's meaning when he said that a person who is capable of lying is capable of anything? Well, if you're willing to disregard the truth and speak an utter falsehood, then you've no respect for the other person. And one level of immorality like that can escalate. So if you're willing to tell lies to get your own way, then it's not such a big step to stealing or hurting to get your own way. Hey, truth is a funny thing. 3 people in a round room, each standing in a corner, apple on the table. Each person has their own view. Half the apple is rotten, 4th person is spitting, half a worm. Yeah, well, that's this conventional truth, which is based on perception. Now, my perception of the apple, this is a good, nice, red, sound, ripe apple. You're on the other side of the room, you see the rotten spot and the worm crawling around in it. You say, no, that apple's rotten. And we're both expressing the truth based on our perception. But that's actually a good example of the conventional truth, which is only based on what we perceive. You can't really cut in deeper than that. There's a well-known metaphor story that's similar to that which you said, Ted, is the blind men and the elephant. The blind men are confronted with an elephant, and one of them feels the trunk and says, "Oh, it's a garden hose." And the other one feels the leg and says, "It's a tree stump," and so on. And there's a couple of different versions of that story. In the Jain version, which doesn't go any further than that, it says, there's no, because the Jains had a very kind of convoluted view of truth and reality. There's like 7 different levels or types of perception of reality, and there's no resolution to it in the Jain story. But in the Buddhist version, the king is up on the balcony. He set this whole thing up as an amusement. He's up in the balcony with his harem and his advisors, and they're looking down and kind of chuckling at these blind fools feeling the elephant. But because he can see the whole elephant, so this is like his higher view of truth. Okay, next one. Sometimes it's very difficult to judge if we are bending the truth or we're actually saying the truth. It's our motivation to be truthful also creates doubts when things are out of the mouth. yeah, that's, we have to learn to discipline our speech, to not just babble off, the first sort of impulse, but to use measured and thoughtful speech. Kind of think before you speak. So there's a there's an old saying, make sure brain is engaged. Make sure brain is engaged before operating mouth. It's like a safety warning. Make sure brain is engaged before operating mouth. What about faking your mood in front of people? Is this untruthful? Yeah, it seems like a mild form of untruth. You're expressing, you're communicating something, expressing something. Normally we think of communication or expression as verbal, but there's also communication we do with our bodies and our faces. Good point. Never measure once and out twice with speech, only carpentry. Yeah. Never measure once and cut twice. Yeah. Yeah, the saying in carpentry is measure twice, cut once. And another saying is, I cut this board 3 times and it's still too short. But I think the point here is, once something is said, you can't really take it back. You can apologize. You can immediately say, "Oh, I'm sorry I said that," but it's already out there. It's already in the ether, in the other person's mind. So some restraint with speech, some care is required. This should be easier with writing, but people have a tendency to just fire off something into the ether. Now with the internet, so easy to just put out an email or tweet or something, just in the heat of the moment, and then regret it later. How to explain to others when they put out false allegations? Is this the result of our past karma? Yeah, everything that happens to us is related to our past karma. But we can't have multiple feelings at one time. Example, feeling tired and feeling empathy. You can put your tiredness to the back and engage in listening. Yeah, that's true. That's a very good observation. Out of compassion, but I think what the question about faking your mood is like pretending to be happy when you're in a difficult situation or something. So next week we're doing a resolution, adhitthana. So that should that follows on quite well from this one, actually. Buddha also said not everything happens because of karma. Yeah, that's true, but that is the exception, is that our choices, our free will is not bound by karma, else would be totally determined. But when everything we experience is not entirely caused by karma, there is a component of karma in every sense experience. So if you're experiencing someone bullying you, that's karma is not the only cause of that, but it is one of the causes. I think from experience that it is important to clearly say I don't know when I don't know. Yeah, that's a very good point. To make it clear, the level of certainty you have about a statement is sometimes very good to clarify. You could just say, "Well, I don't know," rather than try and sound smart, and come up with something. Just make it up. Just say, "I don't know." Or if if you think something but you're not really sure, then phrase it that way. Well, I think it's like this. Is it ever okay not to tell the truth if it means a better outcome for all? Not a lie, but just not tell the truth. Yeah, like I said, just be quiet. Don't it's not necessary to say everything. Even it's always the option to just be silent, to avoid the question. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you judge would make the least ripples, make the least trouble. Sometimes silence can be misconstrued. Yeah, well, you can't help that. That's the other person's delusion. So I think we'll wind it down unless there's any last questions. So the other person's delusions you have no responsibility of. Yeah, ultimately we're all responsible for our own mind states. Out of compassion, you can try and clear the other person's delusion by telling them the truth if that seems like it'll work, if it seems useful. But you're not really bound to do that. You're responsible for your own mind states, and so is the other person. It can be hard to know the truth within oneself. Yes. Yeah, very hard. Okay. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up and see you again next week. What date will that be? It'll be. I'm just looking at the calendar here. Okay, it'll be in the new month, so we should have a good bandwidth. I run out of bandwidth by the end of the month, so that's why I've had difficulty in the past with some of these live streams. Okay. Bye now. Okay.